The message came at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Ambassador Kong Doan was sleeping in his small apartment in the United Earth Coalition headquarters when his communication device started screaming. He opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. He already knew something was wrong. The Galactic Council never sent messages at night unless there was trouble. He sat up and read the message twice. Then he read it a third time. The words were polite, as all council messages were, but behind the polite words, Doan could feel something cold, something dangerous. You are summoned to appear before the Galactic Council Assembly. The matter concerns human activity in the Outer Reach territories. Your presence is required within 4 standard days. Failure to appear will be considered admission of guilt. Admission of guilt. Doan let those words sit in his mind. The Council had never used such language with humanity before. In 12 years of membership, humans had been treated like children. Annoying, perhaps. Amusing sometimes. But never like criminals. He made 3 calls before the sun rose over Seoul. The first was to Commander Yoon Hana. She answered on the second ring, already awake, already dressed in her military uniform. Hana never seemed to sleep. Some people said she was more machine than human, but Doan knew better. She simply understood that the universe did not wait for people to rest. I saw the message, she said. Her face on the screen was calm, but her eyes were sharp. They are making a move against us. We do not know that yet, Doan replied. Yes, we do. Hana's voice carried no emotion. The Outer Reach has crystalline Hellion. The Kelethi have wanted that territory for 200 years. Now suddenly we are summoned for unknown crimes. This is not coincidence, Ambassador. Doan did not argue. He had thought the same thing. His second call was to Dr. Park Tai-ho, the Coalition's chief science advisor. Tai-ho was older than the others, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many disappointing things. But his mind was still sharp, still hungry for truth. I will prepare analysis equipment, Tai-ho said simply. Whatever evidence they present, I will find the lies in it. You assume there will be lies? Tai-ho almost smiled. Ambassador, I have studied alien civilizations for 40 years. I have learned one thing above all else. When powerful beings want something that belongs to weaker beings, they always find a reason to take it. And the reason is always a lie. The third call was to analyst Shin Youngji. She was the youngest member of his team, only 32 years old. But Yoonji had a gift that could not be taught. She could read patterns in information the way some people read books. She saw connections that others missed. I have already started, Yoonji said when she answered. Her fingers were moving across multiple screens behind her. I am accessing every communication channel I can reach. Council frequencies, diplomatic back channels, even some private networks. Is that legal? Doan asked. Yoonji looked at him through the screen. Ambassador, they summoned us for crimes we did not commit. I do not think they care about legal anymore, and neither should we. Doan ended the call and stood by his window. Outside, Seoul was waking up. Millions of people were starting their day, drinking coffee, taking their children to school, complaining about traffic. They did not know that far away, in the cold spaces between stars, something was happening that could change everything. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 12 years. In the grand history of the galaxy, that was nothing. Some species had been members for 10,000 years. Others had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. When human ships first made contact with alien life, there had been celebration on Earth. People danced in the streets. Leaders made speeches about a new age of cooperation and friendship. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But Doan remembered what came after the celebration. He remembered the looks on alien faces when they first saw humans. Not wonder. Not welcome. Something else, fear. The aliens tried to hide it, of course. They smiled with whatever mouths they had. They spoke polite words through translation devices. They welcomed humanity to the galactic family and gave them a seat in the council, the lowest seat. In the back of the great chamber, where new species were expected to sit quietly and learn, but Doan had seen the fear. He saw it in the way they watched human ships, counting them, measuring them. He saw it in the questions they asked about human history. How many wars had humans fought? How quickly had humans developed nuclear weapons? How did humans treat species weaker than themselves? The aliens were not studying humanity out of curiosity. They were studying humanity the way a person studies a dangerous animal. The journey to Tassara Station took 3 days. Doan spent most of that time in meetings with his team. They went over everything they knew about the Outer Reach conflict. Human colonists had been settling there for 5 years, building new homes on planets that no other species wanted. The planets were harsh and difficult, but humans were good at surviving in harsh places. Then, 6 months ago, Calathi survey ships appeared. They claimed the territory belonged to them. They demanded that humans leave. The coalition refused. The territory was unclaimed when humans arrived. By galactic law, it now belonged to humanity. The Calathi were angry, but they did nothing. They simply left. Now Doan understood why. They had been preparing something else. On the final day of travel, Yunji came to him with a pale face. "I intercepted fragments of a council communication," she said. "It was heavily protected, but I managed to decode parts of it." "What did it say?" Yunji looked at him with eyes full of worry. "The council already voted ambassador 3 days ago. Before they even sent us the summons." Doan felt something cold settle in his stomach. What was the verdict? Guilty. Yunji's voice was barely a whisper. "They found us guilty before we even knew there was a trial." The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Tessera Station appeared in the viewport. It was enormous, a structure of metal and light floating in the darkness of space. Thousands of ships surrounded it, representing hundreds of species. Duhan looked at his team. Hannah stood straight and ready, her hand near the weapon she always carried. Taiho clutched his analysis tablet like a shield. Yanji was still working, still searching for more information. "Whatever happens in there," Doan said quietly, "remember who we are. Remember what we represent. We are not just for people. We are 8 billion voices. We are every human who ever lived and died and hoped for something better." The docking clamps connected. The airlock opened, and the human delegation walked into the station, knowing they were walking into a trap, but walking forward anyway, because that was what humans did. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room Doan had ever seen. It stretched upward for hundreds of meters, with seats carved into the walls in rising circles. Each circle belonged to a different species, and each species sat watching as the human delegation entered from the bottom. 847 species. 847 different kinds of eyes. Looking down at 4 humans walking across a floor that seemed to go on forever, Doan kept his back straight. He had learned long ago that aliens watched human body language very carefully. They could not always understand human words, but they understood when a human was afraid. He would not give them that satisfaction. The seats for humanity were at the very bottom, near the floor. Junior members, they called it. Species that had not yet proven themselves. Doan led his team to their places and sat down. The seats were uncomfortable, designed for bodies that were not human. Another small insult in a long list of small insults, Speaker Vorn stood at the center of the chamber, on a raised platform that made him look even taller than he already was. The Calathi were a proud species, with scaled skin, the color of dark water, and eyes that never seemed to blink. Vorn had been speaker for 60 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had made decisions that changed the fate of worlds. Now he looked at the humans with something that might have been satisfaction, this assembly is called to. Address crimes committed by the human species. In the Outer Reach territories, Vorn announced. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. 3 vessels of the Calathi Dominion were attacked and destroyed. 2,400 Calathi citizens are dead. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Dohan felt Hannah tense beside him. "The evidence is clear and undeniable," Vorn continued. He waved one long arm, and holographic images appeared in the air above the chamber floor. They showed wreckage. Broken ships drifting in space. Bodies floating among the debris. Weapon signature analysis confirms these vessels were destroyed by human military technology. More images appeared. Data streams. Energy patterns. Technical readouts that most species in the chamber could not understand but would accept as truth anyway. The human colony ships in the region were tracked. Their movements placed them at the site of the attack during the time the attack occurred. A map appeared, showing the positions of ships, the paths they traveled, the terrible intersection where Calathi vessels met their end. Vorn lowered his arm, and the images faded. The Calathi Dominion demands justice. They demand reparations for the lives lost. They demand the immediate surrender of all human colonies in the outer reach, and they demand the reduction of Earth's military fleet to pre-space flight levels. To ensure such violence can never happen again, the chamber erupted in voices. Some species seemed shocked. Others seemed pleased. A few sat in silence, watching carefully. Doan stood up. Speaker Vorn, the human delegation, requests time to investigate these claims. We have received no prior information about this incident. We cannot respond to accusations we have not been allowed to examine. Vorn's eyes fixed on Doan. There was no warmth in that gaze. No fairness. Only the cold certainty of someone who had already decided the outcome. Your request is noted, Vorn said, and denied. The Council has already examined the evidence. The Council has already reached a verdict. Doan felt his heart stop. Beside him, Yunji made a small sound. She had been right. The trial was over before it began. High Arbiter Talus rose from her seat in the upper circles. The Arbiters were supposed to be neutral. They were supposed to ensure that justice was served fairly, but Talus looked at the humans the same way Vorn did. With the same cold eyes, the same hidden satisfaction. The council vote was conducted 3 days ago, Talus announced. 427 species voted in favor of the sanctions against humanity. 18-9 voted against. The remainder chose not to participate. 3 days ago? Doan's voice was louder than he intended. We were summoned 4 days ago. You voted before we even received the message. The evidence was sufficient, Talus replied. Human presence was not required for evaluation. Human presence was not. Doan stopped himself. He took a breath. He looked at his team. Taiho was working furiously on his tablet, analyzing the holographic data that had been shown. His face was tight with concentration. Ambassador Taiho said quietly, "The weapon signatures. They are generic patterns, available in any military database in the galaxy. Anyone could have made those marks." What about the ship positions? The tracking data shows our colony ships in the region, but the attack trajectory is wrong. Based on the approach angle, the attacking vessels came from the opposite direction. Our ships could not have reached that position in the time shown. It is physically impossible. Doan looked back at the chamber. 847 species, and how many of them knew this evidence was false? How many of them had helped create it? He looked at Delegate Ren of the Asari Federation. Ren had always been friendly to humans. She had helped them navigate the complex politics of the council. She had shared meals with Doan's team and told them stories about her homeworld. Now, she would not meet his eyes. She sat in her seat, looking at the floor. Her shoulders bent with what might have been shame. Commander Hannah leaned close to Doan. They planned this. The Calathi want the outer reach. The crystalline helion there is worth more than most planetary economies. We were in their way, so they created a reason to remove us. But why would the council go along with it? Hannah's voice was hard. Because they are afraid of us, Ambassador. They have been afraid since the day we first appeared. A species that went from wooden boats to starships in less than 1,000 years. A species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions and kept going anyway. They do not understand us. And what they do not understand, they want to destroy. Yunji looked up from her screens. I am detecting unusual communication activity. Multiple council members are sending encrypted messages to Calathi military channels. She paused. They are coordinating. This is not just the Calathi. This is the entire council. Doan stood in the center of the grand chamber, surrounded by 847 species that had already decided his people were guilty. The evidence was fake. The trial was fake. Everything was fake, but the consequences would be real. If humanity accepted these sanctions, they would lose their colonies. They would lose their fleet. They would become helpless, dependent on the mercy of species that had none. And if they refused, Doan thought about Earth, about the billions of people living their lives, raising their children, dreaming their dreams. They did not know what was happening here. They did not know that far away in a room full of aliens, their future was being decided without their voice. He thought about his mother, Sujin, still living in the house where he grew up. She had always told him to stand straight, to speak truth, to never bow to those who tried to make him feel small. Speaker Vorn was watching him, waiting for him to accept the verdict, waiting for him to kneel. Dohan looked at his team. Hannah nodded once, her hand resting on her weapon. Taiho closed his tablet, his work done. Yunji met his eyes with fierce determination. They all knew what came next. Speaker Vorn Doan said. His voice was calm, steady, clear. The human delegation does not accept this verdict. The chamber fell silent. We reject your evidence. We reject your process. And we reject your authority to judge us. Vorn's eyes widened. In 4,000 years, no species had ever said those words, until now. The silence in the Grand Chamber was absolute. 847 species held their breath. Waiting to see what the humans would do next, Speaker Vorn recovered first. His scales rippled with what might have been anger or confusion. In 4,000 years of council history, no species had ever rejected a verdict. There were procedures for appeals. There were processes for review. But outright rejection, it was unthinkable. Ambassador Kang, Vorn said, his voice carrying a warning edge. Perhaps you do not understand the situation. The council has spoken. The verdict is final. You may request a formal appeal, which will be heard in, he paused, checking his data screen, 18 standard months. 18 months. Doan repeated the words slowly. While our people remain accused of murder, while your fleets prepare to take our colonies, while you choke our trade routes and turn other species against us? He shook his head. No, Speaker. We understand the situation perfectly, and you understand that defiance is not an option. Doan looked at him for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone in the chamber, including his own team. He walked away from the human section. He walked toward the center of the chamber, toward the raised platform where Vorn stood. Guards from 3 different species moved to stop him, but Vorn raised a hand. He was curious now. He wanted to see what this strange little human would do. Duhan stopped at the exact center of the chamber floor. He could feel thousands of eyes on him. He could feel the weight of history pressing down. What he did in the next few minutes would be remembered forever. He reached up and removed his translation device from his ear. The small piece of technology that allowed him to understand alien languages and be understood in return. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Without translation, no alien species could understand him. He was speaking Korean, the language of his ancestors, the language his mother had taught him as a child. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Some species were checking their translation devices, wondering why they had stopped working. Others were simply staring, trying to understand why this human was making meaningless sounds. Doan smiled. It was not a friendly smile. He put the translation device back in his ear and switched to Galactic Common, the shared language of the Council. 12 years ago, your survey ships found a small planet in an unremarkable star system. And on that planet, you found something that terrified you. He turned slowly, looking at the circles of seats rising above him. Looking at the hundreds of species that had gathered to condemn his people, you found a species that had done the impossible. We crossed the void between stars and ships held together with mathematics and stubbornness. We built rockets before we had computers. We walked on our moon using technology less powerful than your children's toys. We did not have your resources. We did not have your knowledge. We did not have your thousands of years of history. We had nothing but ourselves. His voice grew stronger, and you looked at us and you were afraid, because you understood something that we did not understand about ourselves. You saw what we could become. Speaker Vorn stepped forward. Ambassador, this emotional display changes nothing. The verdict is a lie.
Oh.
Doan's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. And everyone in this room knows it. He gestured toward the empty air where the holographic evidence had appeared. Those weapon signatures are generic patterns available in any database. My science advisor confirmed this in minutes. The attack trajectory proves our ships could not have been there. The timing is impossible. The evidence was created to justify a decision that was already made. Murmurs rippled through the chamber again. Some species were nodding. Others were looking uncomfortable. This is not about justice, Doan continued. This is about the crystalline Helion deposits in the outer reach. This is about the Kelathi wanting resources that belong to us. By every law you yourselves created, this is about powerful species taking from weaker ones because they can. Enough. Born's voice boomed through the chamber. You forget your place, human. You are a junior species. You have no right to. I have every right. Doan did not shout. He did not need to. His quiet voice somehow carried more weight than Vorn's anger. I am a citizen of Earth. I speak for 8 billion people who have survived everything the universe could throw at them. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters that would have broken lesser species. And now I speak against this council and its corruption. He turned to face the assembled species directly. Some of you remember your own histories. Some of you remember when your species was young, when older civilizations looked down on you, when you had to fight for your place in the galaxy. You know what this feels like? He paused, letting his words settle. And some of you helped plan this. Some of you have been afraid of humans since the day we first appeared. You have been waiting for a reason to strike against us. Well, now you have your reason. A lie. A fabrication. A story that nobody who looks closely will believe. Commander Hannah stood up from the human section. Her movement was sharp and deliberate. Then Dr. Taiho rose. Then Analyst Yanji. One by one, every human in the chamber got to their feet. You expected us to beg, Doan said. You expected us to accept your false judgment and pray for mercy. But you forgot something important about humans. He took a step toward the exit. We do not beg. Delegate Mira of the Veth Collective spoke from her seat. The Veth were old and wise, observers who rarely participated in council politics. Ambassador Kong, you understand that refusing the council's authority will have consequences? Your species will stand alone against all of us. Doan looked at her. Unlike the others, Mira's eyes held no hostility. Only curiosity. Only the desire to understand. Delegate Myra, my species has always stood alone. We were alone on our planet for millions of years. We were alone when we reached for the stars. We were alone when we discovered that the universe was full of life that wanted nothing to do with us. He smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. Being alone is what we know. It is what made us strong. High Arbiter Talus stood up. If you leave this chamber, you will be declaring yourselves enemies of the Council. Your trade agreements will be void. Your diplomatic protections will be removed. Your ships will be considered hostile in all Council space, and so be it. Talus looked genuinely shocked. You would choose war over peace. Doan shook his head. No, Arbiter. You have chosen this. You chose it when you fabricated evidence. You chose it when you voted before hearing our defense. You chose it when you decided that humans were too dangerous to exist as equals. He walked toward his team. We are simply responding to the choice you already made. Taiho and Yunji followed. For humans walking across the vast floor of the Grand Chamber, heading toward the great doors at the far end, this is madness, someone called out from the upper circles. You cannot possibly win against all of us. Doan did not stop walking. He did not turn around, but Hannah did. She looked up at the hundreds of species watching. them leave and said 5 words that would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. We are not trying to win. She turned back and continued, walking. We are trying to survive. There is a difference, and it is a difference that will destroy you. The great doors opened. The 4 humans walked through them into the corridor beyond. Behind them, the grand chamber exploded into chaos. Species shouted at each other. Accusations flew. Alliances began to crack. And somewhere in the distance, human ships were already moving. The corridor outside the grand chamber was long and empty. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the walls. Doan walked in front, his footsteps echoing in the silence. His team followed close behind. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. They had just done something that no species had ever done in 4,000 years of galactic history. They had told the council to go to hell. Yunji's tablet beeped. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Ambassador, Council security forces are mobilizing. They are trying to lock down the station. Doan did not slow down. How long do we have? Minutes. Maybe less. Hannah moved forward, her hand on her weapon. We need to reach our ship. Once we are off this station, they cannot stop us without starting a war. They might start a war anyway, Taiho said quietly. Then at least we will face it in our own ship, not in a prison cell. They turned a corner and found themselves facing a squad of Kalathi guards. 6 of them, armed with plasma rifles, standing in a line across the corridor. Their commander stepped forward. Ambassador Kong, by order of Speaker Vorn, you are to be detained until further notice.
Alan?
He looked at the guards, at their weapons, at the cold determination in their eyes. These were soldiers doing their job. They had probably been told that humans were dangerous criminals. They probably believed it. Step aside, Doan said. His voice was calm. We are leaving this station. The commander shook his head. I cannot allow that. You cannot stop it. The commander raised his weapon. I have 6 trained soldiers, and you have 4 diplomats. The mathematics are simple. Hannah laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that made the Kalathi guards uncomfortable. They had never heard a human laugh before. It sounded wrong to their ears. Too harsh. Too confident. Let me tell you something about humans, Hannah said, stepping forward. When we were still young on our planet, we hunted animals 10 times our size. We did not have claws or fangs or thick skin. We had sharp sticks and the willingness to die trying. And we won. Every time. She took another step. The guards shifted nervously. You have 6 soldiers. We have 4 diplomats, she smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. But our diplomats grew up on a planet where everything tried to kill us. The water, the weather, the animals, each other. We learned to fight before we learned to talk. The commander's weapon trembled slightly. Just slightly. But Doan noticed. Move, Hannah said. 1 word, 1 command. Spoken with absolute certainty. For a moment, nobody moved. The corridor was silent, except for the hum of the station's systems. Then, slowly, the Kalathi commander lowered his weapon. He stepped aside. His soldiers followed. Doan walked past them without a word. His team followed. They did not run. They did not show fear. They walked like they owned the corridor, the station, the entire galaxy. Behind them, the commander spoke into his communication device. They are heading for Docking Bay 7. I could not stop them. Why not? Demanded a voice on the other end. The commander paused. He looked at the corridor where the humans had disappeared, because they were not afraid. The human ship was called the Dawn of Hope. It was small compared to the massive vessels of older species. Its hull bore scars from a dozen journeys through dangerous space. Its engines were loud and inefficient by galactic standards. But it was fast, and it was strong, and it was theirs. Doan strapped himself into the command chair. Around him, his team took their positions. Hannah at weapons. Taiho at sensors. Yunji at communications. Status. Doan asked. Station security is trying to override our docking clamps, Yoonji reported. They will succeed in approximately 90 seconds. Can we break free before then? Hannah's fingers danced across her console. If we fire our engines at full power, we will tear the clamps apart. It will damage our hull, but we will be free. Do it. The Dawn of Hope roared to life. Its engines blazed with blue fire. Metal screamed as the ship tore itself away from the station. Warning lights flashed. Alarms wailed. But the ship was moving, pulling away from Tessara Station, heading for open space. We are clear, Hannah announced. Minor hull damage? Nothing critical. Doan let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Yoonji, broadcast protocol homeward. All channels. All frequencies. Every human ship and colony needs to hear this. Yoonji nodded and activated the communication system. Her voice was steady as she spoke the words that would change everything. Attention all United Earth Coalition assets. This is analyst Shin Young-ji aboard the Dawn of Hope. Protocol Homeward is now in effect. I repeat, Protocol Homeward is now in effect. All ships to defensive positions. All colonies to emergency status. This is not a drill. Across the galaxy, human ships received the message. In the outer reach, colony defense platforms powered up. Along the trade routes, cargo vessels changed course, heading home. At the edges of Council space, hidden sensor stations activated, their electronic eyes watching for any sign of attack. Back on Tessara Station, Spikervorn stood in the Grand Chamber, surrounded by chaos. Species were arguing. Alliances were crumbling. The humans had been gone for less than an hour, and already the Council was falling apart. What is happening? Demanded High Arbiter Talus. Hey, why is this causing so much disruption? Delegate Ren of the Asari Federation spoke up. For the first time since the humans arrived, she met Vorn's eyes directly. Because they were right. The evidence was false, and now everyone knows it. That is not possible. The evidence was fabricated. Ren's voice was cold. I reviewed it myself. The weapon signatures are generic templates. The tracking data is inconsistent. The entire case was built on lies. She stood up from her seat. I am ashamed that I did not speak sooner. I am ashamed that I let fear make me silent. Vorn's scales rippled with anger. You forget your place, delegate. It. No, speaker. I finally remember it. Ren walked toward the chamber doors. The Asari Federation will not participate in any action against humanity. We withdraw our support for the sanctions. Other species began to stir. Murmurs became voices. Voices became shouts. On the Dawn of Hope, Taiho looked up from his sensor display. Ambassador, I am detecting unusual activity in the outer reach. Council ships are moving toward our colonies. How many? At least 50. Kelathi, heavy cruisers. They are not waiting for official authorization. Doan nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Kelathi had invested too much in their plan to abandon it now. They would try to take the colonies before humanity could respond. Yoonji, contact Admiral Choi Yunho. Tell him what is coming. Already done, Ambassador. The Admiral says he is ready. Hannah looked at Doan. Ready. We have maybe 15 ships in the outer reach. They are sending 50. How is he ready? Doan allowed himself a small smile. Because we knew this was coming, Commander. We have known for months. We just needed them to make the first move. You planned this? Not this exactly. But something like this. The crystalline Helion deposits were always going to attract attention. We knew that eventually, someone would try to take them from us. So we prepared. Naho shook his head in wonder. The sensor stations. The defensive platforms. The positioning of our ships. It all makes sense now. We could not prevent this conflict, Doan said, but we could make sure that when it came, we would not be caught unprepared. He turned to look out the viewport, where stars drifted past in the endless darkness. They think we are helpless. They think we are afraid. They think that because we are young and small, we will break easily. He stood up and walked to the viewport. They are wrong. Behind them, Tassara Station grew smaller and smaller. The Grand Chamber, where 847 species had watched in horror as humans marched out of the assembly, was just a distant point of light. In front of them, the galaxy waited. Vast and dark and full of danger, but also full of possibility. "Take us home," Dohan said quietly. "We have a war to win." 3 months passed. The Kalathi fleet arrived at New Busan on a cold morning, as measured by the colony's artificial time cycle. 53 heavy cruisers dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons already charged. Their commanders already certain of victory. Admiral Choi Yun-ho watched them from the bridge of the carrier Taiyakji. He was an old man with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts. He had protected colony ships through dangerous space. He had seen battles that most people only read about in history books, but he had never seen anything like this. 53 ships, his executive officer reported. Standard Kalathi assault formation. They are demanding our immediate surrender. Yunho studied the tactical display. 53 Kalathi ships against 15 human vessels. By every calculation, by every rule of warfare that the galaxy accepted, this battle should be over in hours. The Kalathi had more ships, more weapons, more experience. They had fought wars when humanity was still learning to use fire. "It send no response," Yunho said. "Let them wonder what we are thinking." Kalathi commander waited for 30 minutes. Then, as expected, he ordered his fleet to advance. The massive cruisers moved forward, their energy weapons powering up, their targeting systems locking on to the small human ships. They expected the humans to run. They expected fear and panic and desperate attempts to escape. What they did not expect was what actually happened. The human ships did not run. They scattered. In an instant, the 15 human vessels broke formation and flew in 15 different directions. Some dove toward the planet. Some raced toward the asteroid field. Some accelerated straight at the Kalathi fleet, weaving through the gaps between enemy ships. "What are they doing?" the Kalathi commander demanded. "This is madness." It was madness. It was also genius. The Kalathi had trained for centuries to fight in formations. Their weapons were designed to target groups of enemy ships moving in predictable patterns. Their tactics assumed that opponents would behave rationally, would try to present a united front, would follow the rules of civilized warfare. Humans did not follow rules. The first Kalathi cruiser exploded 3 hours into the battle. A human destroyer had hidden behind an asteroid, waiting in silence, its engines cold, its systems minimal. When the cruiser passed by, the destroyer fired everything it had at point-blank range. The cruiser never saw it coming. "One down," Yunho said quietly. 52 to go. The battle lasted 11 days. It was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a nightmare. Human ships appeared from nowhere, attacked, and vanished. They hid in asteroid shadows. They buried themselves in ice clouds. They pretended to be dead, drifting among wreckage, then came back to life at the worst possible moment. One human captain loaded his cargo holds with rocks from the asteroid belt and accelerated toward a Kalathi cruiser at full speed. When the cruiser's shields stopped the rocks, the captain was already gone, having ejected in an escape pod just before impact. The distraction allowed 3 other human ships to strike the cruiser from behind. Another captain broadcast a surrender signal, then detonated antimatter charges when Kalathi boarding parties approached. The explosion destroyed 2 cruisers that had been waiting to accept the surrender. The Kalathi did not understand. They could not understand. In their entire history, they had never encountered an enemy that fought like this. An enemy that had no regard for proper tactics. An enemy that was willing to try anything, no matter how desperate or foolish it seemed. On the 6th day, the Kalathi commander sent a message to Admiral Yunho. "This is not warfare. This is insanity." Yunho's response was brief. "You tried to take our homes. What did you expect?" By the end of the 11th day, the Kalathi had lost 22 ships. 40% of their fleet destroyed by an enemy that was supposed to be helpless. The remaining ships retreated, leaving the wreckage of their cruisers drifting among the stars, Humanity had lost 7 ships. Over 400 people were dead. It was a terrible cost. But it was victory. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Traders carried it from station to station. Diplomats whispered it in corridors. News networks broadcast it to billions of beings on thousands of worlds. The humans had won. Against impossible odds, against the most powerful military in the region, they had won. The Veth Collective was the first to respond. Delegate Myra, who had watched the humans walk out of the council, sent a private message to Earth. She wanted to establish back-channel communications. She wanted to understand. The Asari Federation was next. Delegate Wren, who had resigned in shame after the rigged trial, offered her services to the human diplomatic corps. She had knowledge of council politics that humans lacked. She wanted to make things right. Then others came. The Voss Trade Union, the Surati Alliance, the Keth Republic. 17 species in total, reaching out to humanity, requesting contact, requesting friendship, requesting asylum in human space, not because humans had won a battle, but because humans had shown them something they had forgotten: courage on Earth. In a small apartment in Seoul, an old woman named Kong Soo-jin sat in her chair and watched the news. Her son's face appeared on the screen. Ambassador Kong Duan, the man who had told the Galactic Council to go to hell, the man who had walked out of an assembly of 847 species, the man who was now wanted for war crimes by governments that no longer had the power to catch him. Soo-jin smiled and poured herself a cup of tea. Her son had called her the night before the trial. He had been nervous, she could tell, but he had not been afraid. Yama, he had said, if they push us, I will push back. That is what you taught me. She had taught him. Long ago, when he was a child, she had told him that the world would try to make him small. People would try to take from him because they thought he was weak. But he was not weak. He was her son. And her family had never bent to anyone. The news showed images of the Battle of New Busan, ships exploding, fire in the darkness of space. Reporters talked about tactics and casualties and political implications, but Soo-jin did not care about any of that. She only cared that her son was alive, that he was still fighting, that he had not given up. 300 light-years away. On the observation deck of humanity's new flagship, that same son stood watching the stars. The ship was called the Long Walk. It was the largest vessel humanity had ever built. Its hull was dark gray, scarred from construction and training exercises. Its engines were powerful enough to cross the galaxy in weeks instead of months. Its weapons were built from captured Calathi technology, proved by human engineers who did not understand the meaning of impossible. Dr. Park Tae-ho joined him at the viewport. The old scientist looked tired but satisfied. In his hands, he held a tablet full of reports. 14 more species have requested diplomatic contact, Tae-ho said. 3 of them are founding members of the council. Doan nodded slowly. And the council itself? Divided. Speaker Vorn is trying to hold it together, but the cracks are spreading. Many species are questioning the evidence against us. Some are demanding independent investigations. They are starting to doubt. They are starting to think. Tae-ho set down his tablet. For 4,000 years, the council has maintained order through fear. Fear of being cast out. Fear of being alone. But we showed them something different. We showed them that being alone is not the worst thing that can happen. Being ruled by liars is worse. Duan thought about that for a long moment. Outside the viewport, stars drifted past. Billions of them. Trillions. Each one might have planets. Each planet might have life. The galaxy was vast beyond comprehension. They expected us to kneel, he said quietly. Tae-ho nodded. They forgot something important about humans. What is that? The old scientist smiled. We walked out of Africa with nothing but stones and fire. We crossed oceans in wooden boats because we wanted to see what was on the other side. We reached for the moon and touched it with our bare hands. We built cities and nations and empires, and when they fell, we built new ones. He looked at Doan with eyes that had seen too much and still believed in more. Walking out of one more room full of people who underestimated us? That is simply what we do. Doan turned back to the viewport. In the distance, human ships were forming up for patrol. Small ships and large ships. Old ships and new ships, each one crewed by humans who had chosen to fight rather than surrender. The galaxy was watching. 847 species were paying attention now. Some with anger, some with confusion, some with the beginnings of respect, and some with the beginning of something else entirely. Fear. Not the old fear. The fear of what humans might become. This was new fear. Fresh fear. The fear of what humans had already proven they were. A species that would not kneel. A species that would not break. A species that, when pushed to the edge of extinction, would push back with everything they had and more. Doan allowed himself a small smile. The war was not over. It had barely begun. There would be more battles, more losses, more terrible days ahead. But for the first time since that message arrived in his apartment 3 months ago, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. "Take us to the next patrol point," he said to the bridge crew. "We have work to do." The long walk turned toward the stars, its engines blazing, its crew ready.